Chapter 17. It's all starting over. In June, the schools were closed for good. After a final commencement exercise, the teachers were dismissed. The high school produced a second yearbook, Valediction 1945, summing up its years in camp. The introduction shows a page-wide photo of a forearm and hand squeezing pliers around a length of taut barbed wire strung beneath one of the towers. Across the page runs the caption, "From our world, through these portals, to new horizons." That summer, the farm outside the fence gradually shut down. Cultivation stopped. Crops in the ground were harvested as they ripened. Nothing new was planted. They began to auction off the tractors, the trucks, and tools. Then the word went out that the entire camp would close without fail by December 1st. Those who did not choose to leave voluntarily would be scheduled for resettlement in weekly quotas. Once you were scheduled, you could choose a place, a state, a city, a town, and the government would pay your way there. If you didn't choose, they'd send you back to the community you lived in before you were evacuated. Papa gave himself up to the schedule. The government had put him here, he reasoned. The government could arrange his departure. What could he lose by waiting? Outside, he had no job to go back to. A California law passed in 1943 made it illegal now for Issei to hold commercial fishing licenses. And his boats and nets were gone, he knew, confiscated or stolen. Here in camp, he had shelter. The women and children still with him had enough to eat. He decided to sit it out as long as he could. That August, as usual, it was brutally hot. He would sit in the shade on our barrack steps in his undershirt, reading the papers, reading aloud sometimes to Mama and Granny, as he had done for his fellow inmates at Fort Lincoln, filling them in on the state of the world. He would read about Japan's losses during those final weeks of the Pacific War and claim he had predicted it. He would read about the Russians moving into Korea and grumble that if the Americans occupied Japan, there'd be another war within 10 years, maybe 5. He would read about the housing shortage all along the West Coast, brought on by wartime population growth, and he would throw the paper down in disgust. "Argh! Why do you read the papers?" Mama would say. "It always makes you go, ugh!" "They've been so busy building tanks and bombers they've run out of houses for everyone to live in." "It's the war," Mama said. "So where do they think they're going to put people like us?" I was in the washroom this morning, and Akiko told me it is just like 1942 all over again. She got a letter from her sister in Los Angeles. Japanese people coming back from the camps are being put into trailers and Quonset huts. We should have left here when there were still houses to live in. "You were the one who wanted to wait," Papa snapped. I said for a while. "For a while," he mimicked her. "So did you." He raised his voice. "You said it would be too hard on the kids." "You said so yourself." He shouted, rearing back to challenge her. "Then don't tell me we waited too long." Mama's eyes closed, squinting tight, shutting off the conversation. Her face became a web of creases. "Jeannie," she said to me, "come over here. Momo my back a little bit." I was out there with them, in the shade in my shorts and barefooted, waiting for what little coolness might come to us through the pear trees. Most of the recreation leaders were gone by this time. Since the school closed, I had been running loose, and yet not running very far at all, sticking closer to our barracks now than ever before. I stood up and started massaging her shoulders. "Harder," she said. "There's a knot someplace. I can feel it all the way up my neck, all around behind my eyes." I started pounding with my fists like little pistons. Sometimes Kyo and I would take turns doing this, up and down her back. Today, even the fists wouldn't satisfy. Gruffly, Papa said, "Hey, you move over, Jeannie.
Get out of the way.
He swung a leg behind Mama and sat down on the step above, digging his thumbs into the thick flesh below her neck. Breath hissed in through her teeth. She let out 2 tiny groans. He asked her.
What did Dr. Matsui say?
I didn't see him.
Where was he?
He was there, but it was too crowded. I'm going back later. The whole hallway was filled up. Everybody has a headache or a stomach ache or a backache that cannot be explained. Everybody is sick. Everything is like 1942. It is all starting over.
Hey, he ordered. You want a back rub? Sit up straight.
He ground his elbow into the base of her neck, pushing it down her spine. Her groans got louder. Oh, that's it. That's almost it.
Listen, he said. Maybe we will not have to leave so soon. Last night at the block leaders' meeting, it was definitely decided that the camp must remain open until everyone has a place to go back to.
What does the administration say?
The block leaders are preparing a statement to take to them.
Do you think it will do any good? Papa did not answer. He was dragging his elbow slowly up one spinal muscle and staring down the street, where the answer to her question was everywhere pathetically evident. Leaves and windfall pears had piled up beneath the trees. In the park nearby, grass creepers edged out into the graveled paths. Little clusters of debris were slowing down the waterways. All around you saw these signals of neglect, as if the camp itself were slowly, deliberately disintegrating in order to comply with the administration's deadline. Every day another barracks or 2 would fall empty. The outer blocks had long been deserted, filling up with tumbleweeds and sand. Right next to our stairs in Papa's rock garden, the moss was dry. The sand needed raking. No one bothered with it. Mama said, Ko? No answer. Ko?
What?
What are we going to do?
Wait.
For what? She asked.
Listen to me. I have an idea. All these people who are waiting in the hall to see Dr. Matsui, they're worried about where they're going to live and how they're going to make money on the outside. Is that not so?
Yes.
Suppose we organize some kind of a cooperative for Japanese people coming back from the camps. We will design a housing project, and all the men looking for work will build houses.
You have to have some land for that, Mama said.
Of course.
You have to have money.
We will get a loan from the government. At the block leaders' meeting, it was decided that they must provide low-interest loans for families returning from the camps. They cannot deprive us of our homes and our fishing boats and our automobiles and lock us up for 3 years and then just turn us loose into the cities again. They have to help us get a new start.
Is this too in the statement they are preparing?
Yes. They deliver it at noon today.
Do you think the government will do anything? Again, Papa did not answer. They both knew what it would be. This time his long pause slipped into pure silence. Without the answer, he could continue dabbling with the dream. Mama's eyes squinted shut. His fingers worked below her shoulder blades. He had found the knot, the tension node, and he homed in on it with a practiced knuckle. Mama rolled her head from side to side, pulling at the tendons in her neck, groaning loudly now, hissing with the painful pleasure of his cure. The last hope that something might postpone our returning to the outside world was extinguished on August 6th, when the atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. That ended the Second World War. America had won. Internment camps were undeniably a thing of the past. I remember seeing the newspaper photos of the mushroom cloud that bloomed above the city and hearing the murmurs that rose ever so quietly from the stunned, almost reverent hush all over camp. The unbelievable horror of what had happened was not yet known. This was as strange, as awesome, as mysteriously unnerving as Pearl Harbor had been. And in the same way that the first attack finished off one period in our lives, so this appalling climax marked the end of another. 9 days later, all over America, people were dancing in the streets. At Manzanar, I suppose there was some rejoicing too. At least we were no longer the enemy. But the atomic bombing, if anything, just sharpened our worry. I still see Papa sitting on our steps for long hours, smoking cigarettes in his ivory holder, staring into the mountains he went to with his eyes whenever he needed sustenance. Here he sat, a man without prospects, perhaps now without even a family in Japan to confirm his own history, 58 years old and his children scattered across the land. Woody in the army at Fort Douglas, Utah, Eleanor in Reno, her husband in Germany with the occupation troops, Bill and Martha and Francis and Lillian in New Jersey, Ray now in the Coast Guard, the only service that would take him at the age of 17. Papa read the papers and studied the changeless peaks while all around us other families were moving out, forcing our name ever higher on the list. Every day, busloads left from the main gate, heading south with their quotas, filled with mamas and papas and grannies who had postponed movement as long as possible, and soldiers' wives like Chizu, and children like Kyo and May and me, too young yet to be out on our own. Some of the older folks resisted leaving right up to the end and had to have their bags packed for them and be physically lifted and shoved onto the buses. When our day finally arrived, in early October, there were maybe 2,000 people still living out there, waiting their turn and hoping it wouldn't come.